College campuses were the site of growing political activism during the 1960s. The civil rights movement, which took off in the 1950s, laid the groundwork for a culture of protest. By the 1960s, groups such as the Black Panthers and the Black United Students had gained an important foothold on campuses. Specific clothing items became closely associated with the particular groups. The Black Beret, for instance, came to symbolize the Black Panthers. The Black United Students held a number of rallies at the Kent State campus and participated in broader campus protests. This image shows members participating in the moratorium to end the war in Vietnam, which took place across the United States in October 1969. College students were central to the resistance because they were the generation being sent to fight and die in the conflict. Enrolling in higher education was one means of receiving a student deferment and avoiding the draft. Another was joining the National Guard. Although images of student protests from the 1960s reveal that students' dress was generally relatively conservative, their elders often characterized these young protesters as rebellious, even iconoclastic. Tensions emerged not simply between the youth and their parents, but between youth and the government. At its extreme, the protests were expressed as a disrespect for the young men who served. At the same time, many protest signs clearly expressed support for GIs. On the whole, the objection to the war was a call to protect and save the lives of young men who had to fight. However, a soldier's uniform did not confer on the wearer the respect and gratitude that is now shown to active duty soldiers and veterans. The tensions between young people and the establishment came to a head at Kent State. When President Richard M. Nixon announced on April 30, 1970, that he was expanding military activities into Cambodia, protests erupted across the United States. Demonstrations in Kent became unruly. In hopes of maintaining order, the town's mayor called the governor of Ohio to request that the Ohio National Guard be sent in. Across the Kent campus and through the town, the young men of the National Guard, many of whom were no older than the students, sought to maintain order. Student protest leaders called for a rally on the Commons at noon on Monday, May 4th, and despite university officials' efforts to prevent such an assembly, students began gathering in the late morning. Tensions came to a head as attempts to peacefully disband the students failed, and some students yelled and threw rocks. Ultimately, some of the guardsmen fired their rifles into the crowd, killing 4 and injuring 9 more. People across the country were shocked by the violence, which pitted the state against young protesters. Following the events at Kent State, the tensions between culture and counterculture persisted. However, high fashion in the years that followed reflected increasing influence of counterculture in street style. The fashion designer Rudy Gernreich made explicit references to the events of May 4th in a collection he presented in October 1970. In this show, known as his Back to School collection, the military-influenced styles went down the runway on models holding real guns. Just as fashion was a vehicle for commentary on political events in the 1960s and 70s, it continues today to be a means of expressing our personal and political values and ideals.